I've spent more than 30 years looking into the eyes of people who think they can outsmart the truth. From the precincts in Chicago to the stage of my show, the faces change, but the lies stay the same. They have a specific look. It's a flicker in the eyes, a slight shift in the posture, a way they try to make themselves look smaller or more victimized than they actually are. I've seen killers, I've seen thieves, and I've seen people who would sell their own soul for a fix or a fast buck. People ask me all the time how I stay so calm or why I get so angry. The truth is, I don't have any patience left for the games. I've seen what happens when the system fails. I've seen the victims who don't have a voice because they are too old, too young, or too scared to speak up. When I sit in that chair, or when I'm standing backstage listening to someone spin a web of absolute garbage, I'm not just listening to a story. I'm looking for the fracture. I'm looking for that one moment where the lie breaks under its own weight. I don't care about your childhood. I don't care about the reasons you think justify your actions. I care about what you did. I care about the person you hurt. That's the code I live by as a cop, and it's the code I live by now. If you come onto my stage and you think you're going to play me, you've already lost before you even sat down. I've seen it all, and I'm tired of the excuses. I'm tired of the I didn't mean to and the it wasn't my fault. It's always someone else's fault, isn't it? But at the end of the day, you're the one who made the choice. You're the one who crossed the line. You're the one who looked a vulnerable person in the face and decided their life was worth less than your greed. A few weeks ago, a case came across my desk that made my blood boil in a way that's hard to describe. It wasn't a violent crime in the sense of blood and bruises, but it was a violation of the most sacred bond there is, family. We had a woman, 78 years old, Mrs. Gable. She spent 40 years working in a factory, saving every penny, trying to make sure she had a little something for her sunset years so she wouldn't be a burden to anyone. She wasn't rich, but she was independent. She was proud. Then you have her grandson, Tyler, 24 years old, able-bodied, full of energy, but apparently completely devoid of a conscience. Tyler didn't want to work. Tyler wanted the life he saw on social media without putting in the sweat. He saw his grandmother's bank account as his personal piggy bank. Over the course of 6 months, $40,000 vanished. That's not a mistake. That's not a loan that went wrong. That's a calculated, cold-blooded theft from a woman who probably changed his diapers and held his hand when he was a kid. When the producers told me about this, I sat in my dressing room for a long time, just staring at the floor. I thought about my own family. I thought about the people I protected on the force who were just like Mrs. Gable, honest people, who did everything right, only to be preyed upon by the people they love the most. This kind of betrayal is a special kind of evil. It's a slow-motion robbery of someone's security and their dignity. I walked out onto that stage, and the first thing I saw was Tyler's face. He was sitting there with his arms crossed, leaning back like he was waiting for a bus, completely unbothered. He had this smirk. It's a smirk I've seen 1,000 times in interrogation rooms. It's the look of someone who thinks they are the smartest person in the room, someone who thinks they can talk their way out of anything because they've been doing it their whole life. His grandmother was sitting next to him, and she looked like she'd been crying for a decade. She looked fragile. She looked like the weight of the world was crushing her. And the worst part, she still wanted to believe him. She was sitting there, holding a crumpled tissue, looking at him with eyes that were still searching for the little boy she used to know. I looked at Tyler, and I didn't see a boy. I saw a predator. I sat down, and I didn't say hello. I didn't offer a handshake. I just stared at him. I wanted him to feel the weight of my gaze. I wanted him to know that the games were over. I asked him straight out, "Where did the money go, Tyler?" He didn't even blink. He looked me right in the eye and said it was all a misunderstanding. He said he had permission. He said she gave it to him because she wanted him to start a business. I looked at Mrs. Gable and asked her if that was true. She just shook her head slowly, the tears starting to fall again. She told me she never authorized those withdrawals. She showed me the statements. I had them in my hand. ATM withdrawals at 3 in the morning at a casino. Transfers to accounts she didn't even recognize. Purchases at high-end clothing stores. That's not a business, Tyler. That's you being a thief. I watched him as I read those charges out loud. Each one was a punch to the gut for that poor woman sitting next to him. $600 at a nightclub, $2,000 at a jewelry store, $500 at a steakhouse. I looked at him and I asked, was the steak good, Tyler? Did it taste better knowing your grandmother can't afford her heart medication this month because of it? He tried to interrupt me. He tried to say that she was forgetful. He actually had the nerve to sit on my stage and tell me that his grandmother had dementia and just didn't remember giving him the money. That's when I felt that heat in my chest. That's the moment where the retired cop in me wants to take over. Using someone's age and health as a shield for your own crimes is about as low as it gets. I leaned in close. I told him to shut his mouth and listen. I told him that I've dealt with guys like him my entire career, punks who think they can gaslight their way out of a crime by making the victim look crazy. But the numbers don't lie. The bank records don't have dementia. The cameras at the ATM don't have a bad memory. I had the photos. I had the proof. And I was going to make them look at every single bit of it. I could see the audience reacting. There was this collective gasp of disgust every time a new transaction was read. But Tyler just sat there trying to maintain that cool exterior. He was trying to play the part of the misunderstood grandson. He started talking about how he was investing the money for her future. I asked him what kind of investment involves a VIP table at a club in South Beach. He stumbled. He started talking about networking. Networking. That's the word they use when they don't have a job and they're spending someone else's money. I told him he wasn't networking. He was shoplifting from his own blood. I looked at Mrs. Gable and I saw the shame on her face. It's a heartbreaking thing to see. She felt ashamed that her grandson turned out this way. She felt like she failed. I told her right then and there, this isn't on you. You did your job. You raised him. You loved him. He's the one who failed. He's the one who should be wearing that shame, not you. But Tyler didn't look ashamed. He looked annoyed. He looked like I was wasting his time. He didn't realize that I was just getting started. I had the results of the polygraph in my folder, and I knew exactly what they were going to show. But I wanted him to sweat first. I wanted him to realize that he wasn't in control of the situation. I've spent years breaking down doors and taking down criminals who were much tougher than this kid. He thought he was a big man because he could steal from an old woman. I was going to show him what a real man looks like, someone who takes responsibility, someone who protects the weak, and someone who doesn't lie when the truth is staring him in the face. The air in the studio was thick. You could feel the tension. It's that moment before the storm hits. I could see the sweat starting to bead on his forehead, despite his best efforts to look unbothered. He kept shifting in his seat. He knew. He knew that I knew. And he knew that in a few minutes, the whole world was going to know. I looked at the bank statement one more time. A withdrawal for $3,000 on the same day Mrs. Gable was supposed to have her roof repaired. The roof never got fixed. It leaked all winter. She had to put buckets in her living room while her grandson was out living it up on her dime. I looked at him and I felt the level of disgust that I usually reserve for the worst of the worst. This wasn't just theft. This was a betrayal of the soul. This was leaving your own grandmother in the cold so you could pretend to be something you're not. I stood up. I didn't want to be sitting down for what was coming next. I wanted to be on my feet, looking down at him, making sure he understood that there was nowhere left to run. I've stood in rooms with guys who killed for less than $40,000. I've looked into the eyes of men who had no souls left. But there is something uniquely pathetic about a man who steals from his own blood. I looked at Tyler, and I saw a coward. There's no other word for it. When you take from a woman who can't defend herself, when you use her love for you as a weapon to pick her pockets, you are a coward. He tried to tell me that his grandmother was confused. He had the audacity to lean over and pat her on the hand, the same hand that probably fed him when he was a baby, and tell her, Graham, you just don't remember the conversations we had. I saw her flinch. It wasn't a flinch of fear. It was a flinch of heartbreak. That's the sound of a heartbreaking right there on my stage, and this kid was too self-absorbed to even notice it. I told him to take his hand off her. I told him that if he touched her one more time, I'd have him removed from the stage right then and there. I wanted him to know that he didn't have any power here. He wasn't the one in charge of the narrative anymore. He started getting defensive then. His voice got higher, his movements more erratic. That's what happens when the lie starts to suffocate you. He started blaming his mother, Mrs. Gable's daughter. He said she was the one who was actually taking the money and that he was just moving it to keep it safe from her. It's the oldest trick in the book, the deflection. If you're caught red-handed, point the finger at someone else. Create enough smoke so people can't see the fire. But I've spent too many years in the wind to be fooled by smoke. I asked him, if you were moving it to keep it safe, why is it gone, Tyler? Why isn't it in the safe deposit box? Why isn't it in a high-yield savings account for your grandmother? Why is it at the blackjack table in Atlantic City? He didn't have an answer for that. He just stared at me, his mouth hanging open a little bit, looking for the next lie to tell. I could see the gears turning in his head, trying to find a way to make the numbers fit his story, but they never fit. Lying is a full-time job, and eventually you get tired. You forget what you said to who, and that's when I catch you. I looked at the audience, and then I looked back at him. I told him about a call I went on years ago. An elderly man had been robbed of a Social Security check. He was sitting in a cold apartment, no food, no heat, just waiting for the end. He didn't have a grandson to help him. He didn't have anyone. And here Tyler was with a grandmother who adored him, who gave him every opportunity, and he was the one robbing her. I asked him how he sleeps at night. I asked him if he thinks about her when he's out spending that money. Does he think about her sitting in that house with the leaking roof? Does he think about her skipping meals so she can afford the property taxes he's making it impossible for her to pay? He just shrugged. He actually shrugged. That's when I knew I wasn't dealing with someone who made a mistake. I was dealing with a narcissist. To him, Mrs. Gable wasn't a person. She was a resource. And he was going to extract every last drop of that resource until there was nothing left but a shell. You think you're a big man, don't you? I asked him. I got up out of my chair and walked over to him. I wanted to be in his personal space. I wanted him to feel the intimidation that his grandmother must feel every time he shows up at her door demanding more. He tried to look away, but I wouldn't let him. I told him to look at the screen. We had the security footage from the bank. It wasn't just some grainy image. It was a clear as day shot of him at the drive-through teller wearing a pair of sunglasses like he was in a movie, signing her name to a withdrawal slip. I asked her, Mrs. Gable, is that your signature? She looked at the screen, her eyes welling up, and she whispered, no, Steve, I don't write like that anymore. My arthritis is too bad. I looked back at Tyler. The smirk was gone. The cool act was crumbling. He started to say that he was helping her sign because her hands were shaking. I told him that was the biggest load of garbage I'd heard all year. You don't help someone sign a check for $5,000 and then put the cash in your own pocket. This is the part of the job that never gets easier, watching a family realize that the person they love is a monster. Mrs. Gable wanted so badly for there to be another explanation. She wanted me to tell her that it was a bank error or that a stranger had stolen his ID. But I couldn't do that. My job isn't to make people feel good, it's to tell the truth. And the truth was that her grandson was a predator. I told her, he's been lying to you from day one. He's been gaslighting you, making you think you're losing your mind so he can keep his hand in your purse. She started to sob, a deep, guttural sound that filled the entire studio. It's a sound you never forget. It's the sound of a woman losing her last bit of faith in the world. And Tyler, he just sat there looking at his fingernails. He was bored by her grief. That's the part that really got to me. The total lack of empathy. It's one thing to steal. It's another thing to watch the person you stole from crumble in front of you and feel absolutely nothing. I decided it was time to bring out the polygraph. I told him, you say you had permission. You say you didn't forge her name. You say you didn't spend a dime of that money on yourself. Well, we're going to find out, aren't we? I saw his throat move. He swallowed hard. He knew the polygraph wasn't something he could charm. It doesn't care about your networking or your investments. It only cares about the physiological response to a lie. I asked him if he was ready to hear the results. He tried to pull a last-minute stunt. He said he felt sick. He said the lights were too bright. He said he didn't think the test was fair because he was stressed. I've heard it all before. Every guilty person who fails a polygraph has an excuse for why the machine is wrong. I told him, the only thing that's unfair here is what you did to your grandmother. Sit down and shut up. I held the envelope in my hand. I let it sit there for a second. I wanted him to feel the weight of it. I wanted him to understand that this was the end of the road. There were no more lies to tell, no more people to blame, just him, the machine, and the truth. I looked at Mrs. Gable and I told her I was sorry. I was sorry she had to be here, and I was sorry she had to find out this way. But she needed to know. She needed to know so she could protect what was left of her life. If she didn't cut him off now, he was going to end up leaving her on the street. I've seen it happen. I've seen seniors lose their homes, their dignity, and their health because of a relative who wouldn't stop taking. I wasn't going to let that happen to her. Not on my watch. I opened the envelope. The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. I looked at the first question. Did you, without your grandmother's permission, withdraw funds from her account for your own personal use? I looked at Tyler. He was staring at the floor now. He wouldn't even look at me. I read the answer he gave, no. Then I read the result. That was a lie. A low murmur went through the crowd. I went to the next one. Did you forge your grandmother's signature on bank documents? His answer, no. The result, that was also a lie. By the time I got to the third question, he was shaking his head, muttering something under his breath. He was trying to disconnect, to go to that place where the truth couldn't reach him. But I was right there, pulling him back. Every single thing you said on this stage was a lie, Tyler, I said. You didn't invest anything, you didn't help her. You're a common thief who happened to pick a victim who loved him. He tried to stand up then, tried to walk off the stage. I didn't let him. I stood in his way. I told him he was going to sit there and listen to what his grandmother had to say. He didn't want to hear it. He wanted to run. Thieves always want to run when the lights come on. But the lights were on now, and they were brighter than he ever imagined. I looked at the cameras, and I looked at him, and I realized that this wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the soul of a young man who had completely lost his way and a grandmother who was forced to choose between her heart and her survival. I stood right there in his path, my chest inches from his face, and I didn't move an inch. You want to walk away now, Tyler? You want to head out that door because the chair is getting a little too hot? That's not how this works. You spent months walking into your grandmother's house, kissing her on the cheek, and then reaching into her bank account while she wasn't looking. You don't get to leave just because I called you out on it. I've spent years dealing with people who think they can just exit the room when the truth gets uncomfortable. In the real world, when you rob someone, you don't get to just opt out of the consequences. I looked him dead in the eye and I told him to sit back down. I told him he owed it to the woman who raised him to stay in that seat and look at the wreckage he caused. He sat back down, but he did it with that pathetic, petulant slouch. He still didn't get it. He thought this was all some kind of performance. He thought that because there were cameras and lights, it wasn't real. But those bank statements are real. That leaking roof is real. And the fact that his grandmother is staring at a future where she might not be able to afford her own groceries is as real as it gets. I turned my back on him for a second to look at Mrs. Gable. I needed her to hear me. I told her, you are not the one who should be crying. You did everything right. You saved your money, you looked after your family, and you trusted your own flesh and blood. Trusting your grandson isn't a mistake, it's what a good person does. He's the one who broke that trust. He's the one who took your goodness and tried to turn it into a weakness. She was shaking, just a small, fragile woman lost in a big chair, and it made me want to go back over to Tyler and let him have it even harder. It's the vulnerability that gets to me. When I was a cop, the calls that stayed with me were the ones involving the elderly. They grew up in a different time, a time when your word meant something and family was everything. They aren't prepared for this new breed of predator, the one that lives in their own guest room. I asked her if she had anything she wanted to say to him. She looked at him, and through her tears, she just asked one question. Why, Tyler? I would have given you anything if you just asked. Why did you have to steal it? And you know what that kid did? He didn't apologize. He didn't break down. He looked at her and said, I told you it was for the business. You just don't understand how things work today. That was it. That was the moment I'd had enough. I leaned over him, and I didn't keep my voice down. I told him he was a disgrace. I told him that there is no business in the world that requires $40,000 of a senior citizen's savings for club tables and designer sneakers. You want to talk about how things work today? I'll tell you how they work. You work a job, you earn a paycheck, you pay your own bills, and if you can't afford a steak, you eat a sandwich. You don't take the money your grandmother needs for her heart medication so you can play big shot for a bunch of people on the internet who don't even know your name. That's not how things work, Tyler. That's called being a parasite. I started going through the list again, but this time I wasn't just reading transactions, I was reading his character. I talked about the day he spent $1,500 at a boutique while his grandmother was at the pharmacy trying to figure out which prescriptions she could skip because she didn't have enough in her checking account. Think about that. Think about the level of selfishness it takes to be standing in a store buying a leather jacket while the woman who loves you is standing at a counter wondering if she can survive the month without her pills. He tried to argue. He said he didn't know she was struggling. I told him that was a lie too. He knew. He saw the mail piling up. He saw the buckets on the floor for the rain. He just didn't care because he was too busy looking at himself in the mirror. I've seen a lot of things, but the dementia lie, the one he tried to use to cover his tracks, that one stayed with me. It's a special kind of cruelty to try and make an elderly person believe they are losing their mind just so you can keep stealing from them. It's gaslighting in its purest, most disgusting form. I told the audience, and I told him, that people who do that are the lowest form of life. You're not just taking her money, you're taking her peace of mind, you're making her doubt her own reality, you're making her feel like she's disappearing. And for what? For a temporary thrill? For a lifestyle you didn't earn? I told him that if I were his father, I'd be ashamed to look at him. I'd be ashamed that I raised someone who could be so cold to the person who deserves his respect the most. The crowd was with me. You could feel the anger in the room. It wasn't just about Tyler. It was about every person out there who has a parent or a grandparent they worry about. It was about the universal truth that you protect your elders, you don't prey on them. I told Tyler that he had one chance right now to be a man. I told him to look at her, admit what he did, and tell her how he was going to pay it back. I told him I didn't want to hear about investments or understandings. I wanted to hear a plan. I wanted to hear him say he was going to get 2 jobs, 3 jobs, whatever it took to put every single cent back into that account. He just sat there, he looked at the floor, he looked at the exit, he looked everywhere but at her. You're a coward, Tyler, I said. A big, tough guy when you're holding her debit card, but a coward when you have to face the music. I've seen this 1,000 times. These guys think they are geniuses until they get caught. Then they turn into children. They want everyone to feel sorry for them. They want to talk about their problems. I don't care about your problems. I care about the $40,000. I care about the roof. I care about Mrs. Gable's dignity. I told him that he was lucky I wasn't the one wearing the badge today, because I'd have no problem walking him right out of here in handcuffs. People think because I'm on TV now that I've softened up. They think I've forgotten what it's like on the street. I haven't forgotten a thing. I still know what a criminal looks like, and I'm looking at one right now. I looked at Mrs. Gable, and I told her that she needed to make a hard choice. I've seen families destroyed because they couldn't set a boundary. I told her that if she didn't press charges, if she didn't cut him off, he would come back. He would come back and he would take the house. He would take the furniture. He would take everything until she was sitting on a curb. It's hard for a grandmother to hear that. She wants to see the boy who used to play in her yard, but that boy is gone. In his place is a man who saw her as an easy mark. I told her, loving him doesn't mean letting him destroy you. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone like this is to let them hit rock bottom. Let them face the police. Let them face a judge. Because if you don't, you're just funding his next trip to the casino. I could see it sinking in for her. The pain was still there, but the realization was starting to take hold. She looked at Tyler, and for the first time that day, she didn't look at him with pity. She looked at him with a kind of clarity. She saw the designer clothes he was wearing bought with her money, and she saw the way he wouldn't even meet her eye. She realized that she was mourning someone who didn't exist anymore. I stood there watching this internal struggle play out on her face, and I felt the sense of heavy responsibility. This is the part of the show they don't always see the aftermath of the truth. It's not always a clean break. It's messy, it's painful, and it leaves scars. But the truth is the only thing that can stop the bleeding. I looked at that polygraph paper in my hand, and I felt the weight of it like it was a lead pipe. I've held a lot of these papers over the years. Some of them bring relief, some of them bring closure, but this one just brought a deep sense of anger. I looked at the results again, making sure I didn't miss a single detail. Every question we asked this kid, he failed. Not a maybe, not an inconclusive, but a flat out deceptive lie. I looked at Tyler. He was looking at the ceiling, trying to act like he was bored, trying to act like the results didn't matter. I've seen that look on the faces of guys being led away in zip ties. It's the look of someone who has realized the game is over, but doesn't have the character to admit it. I leaned forward, my elbows on my knees, and I let the silence hang there for a beat. I wanted him to feel the pressure. I wanted the audience to see the difference between a man who has nothing to hide and a punk who is buried under a mountain of his own making. You failed every single question, Tyler, I said, my voice low and steady. I didn't need to yell. The truth was loud enough. You lied about the permission. You lied about the forgery. You lied about where the money went. You sat here and you looked your grandmother in the eye, the woman who fed you, the woman who took care of you, and you lied to her face while knowing I had the proof in my hand. He tried to start his I was stressed routine again, but I cut him off. I told him I didn't want to hear another word out of his mouth unless it was an apology or a confession. I told him that the machine doesn't care about his stress. It cares about the fact that his heart rate and his sweat glands went crazy the second we asked him if he stole that $40,000. You could try to trick me, you could try to trick your family, but you can't trick your own biology. Your body knows you're a thief, even if your brain is trying to convince you that you're an entrepreneur. I turned to Mrs. Gable. This was the hardest part. I had to be the one to tell her that the boy she loved was officially a predator. I told her, Mrs. Gable, he took that money, he took it knowingly, he took it intentionally, and he spent it on things he didn't need while you were suffering. She didn't scream. She didn't even cry this time. She just seemed to shrink. It was like she was exhaling the last bit of hope she had left. I've seen people break in many ways, but the quiet ones are always the ones that stay with you. She looked at him, and for the first time, she didn't see her grandson. She saw the man who had robbed her of her security. She saw the man who had forced her to live in a house with a leaking roof while he was out buying designer jeans. I asked her, "What do you want to happen now?" She didn't answer right away. She just stared at him, and I could see the battle going on inside her. She still loved him. That's the curse of being a good person, but she knew she couldn't trust him. I looked back at Tyler. He was still trying to maintain that cool posture. I told him he should be on his knees right now. I told him that if he had any shred of decency left in his soul, he would be begging for her forgiveness. But he wasn't. He was just looking for a way out. I've seen this pattern so many times. People like Tyler don't feel guilt. They feel inconvenienced. They aren't sorry they did it. They're sorry they got caught. They're sorry they have to sit in a chair and have someone like me tell them exactly who they are. I told them that in my world, in the world of the Chicago PD, we have a name for people like him. We call them bottom feeders. We call them the people who make society a worse place because they think the rules don't apply to them. You think you're special, Tyler? You think you deserve a life you didn't work for? You're not special. You're just another kid who thought he could take a shortcut on someone else's back. I got up and walked over to the edge of the stage. I needed to talk to the people at home, and I needed to talk to the people in that audience. I told them that this isn't just a story about one bad grandson. This is a story about how we treat our elderly. We live in a world where people think it's okay to discard the people who built this country. We think it's okay to ignore them or to take advantage of them because they might be a little slower or a little more trusting. I told them that as long as I have a platform, I'm going to stand up for the people who can't stand up for themselves. I'm going to be the wall that people like Tyler hit when they try to prey on the vulnerable. I turned back to him and I told him that he was done. No more business deals, no more investments, no more access to that bank account. I told him that if I heard he even stepped foot on her property without her permission, I'd be the first person to call the authorities in this town. I looked at the bank statements one last time. There was one transaction that really stuck in my craw. It was a $500 withdrawal at a casino at 4 in the morning on the same day Mrs. Gable had to go to the hospital for a blood pressure scare. He was at the craps table while she was in the emergency room. I asked him about that. I asked him how he could stand there betting her money while she was lying in a hospital bed wondering if she was going to make it. He said he needed to blow off steam because he was worried about her. I nearly lost it. I told him that's the most disgusting thing I've ever heard. You don't blow off steam by gambling away the money the person in the hospital worked 40 years to save. You stay by their side, you hold their hand. You make sure their bills are paid. You don't go out and try to double your stolen loot while they're fighting for their life. That was the moment I saw a flicker of something in him. It wasn't remorse, but it was fear. He realized that I wasn't going to let him off the hook. He realized that this wasn't going to be a hug it out kind of show. I told him that there is a moral debt he owes that he can never truly pay back. Even if he works every day for the rest of his life and puts every penny back into that account, he can never give her back the peace of mind he stole. He could never give her back the ability to look at her family and feel safe. He stole her sense of home. He turned her sanctuary into a place where she had to hide her purse. I told him that is a crime far worse than the $40,000. You took her dignity, Tyler, you took her trust, and those are things you can't buy at a jewelry store or a nightclub. I sat back down and I looked at Mrs. Gable. I told her that we were going to help her. I told her we were going to get her in touch with people who could help her secure her accounts and make sure he never had access to her money again. I told her that she needed to be strong. I told her that she had to be her own hero now. It's a lot to ask of a 78-year-old woman who just wants to enjoy her retirement, but she didn't have a choice. I told her that if she didn't stand up now, he would be back. Predators always come back to the place where they had success. I told her to look at me and promise me that she wouldn't let him back in that house until he had proven over years, not days, that he was a different person. She looked at me, her face lined with a lifetime of hard work, and now this new, deep sorrow, and she nodded. She said, I promise, Steve. I felt a small sense of relief, but I knew the road ahead for her was going to be incredibly difficult. I looked at him one last time before I told him to get off my stage. I wanted that image burned into my brain, the image of a young man who had everything handed to him and still decided to take more. I told him, Tyler, you're going to walk out of here today and you're probably going to tell yourself that I'm the bad guy. You're going to tell yourself that I'm just a guy on TV who doesn't understand your business or your struggles. But when the sun goes down and you're sitting in whatever room you've crashed in, you're going to have to look in the mirror. And you're going to see a thief. You're going to see a man who robbed his own grandmother. You can hide from me. You can hide from the police for a while, but you can't hide from that reflection. I pointed toward the exit. I didn't want him in my sight for another second. He stood up, tried to mutter one last excuse, but I just barked at him to go. He slunk off that stage like the coward he is, and the audience didn't let him go in silence. They let him know exactly what they thought of him. When he was gone, the studio felt different. The air was lighter, but there was a heavy sadness that remained. I sat back down next to Mrs. Gable. I took her hand. It felt as light as a bird's wing, and it was still shaking. I've seen this 1,000 times, the aftershock of the truth. It's like a storm has passed through, and you're standing in the middle of the debris, trying to figure out what could be salvaged. I told her that she wasn't alone. I told her that my team and I would make sure she got the help she needed to fix that roof and to get her finances in order. But more than that, I told her she needed to find her strength again. I told her, Mrs. Gable, you've spent your life taking care of others. Now it's time to take care of you. Don't let his choices define the rest of yours. You earned your peace. You earned your security. Don't let a predator, even one you shared Sunday dinners with, take that away from you. The silence in the room was absolute. It's those moments that people don't see on the highlights. It's the quiet realization that some things can't be fixed with a check or an apology. The bond between them was shattered. You can't unsteal $40,000. You can't unforge a signature. You can't untell a lie that made a grandmother doubt her own mind. As I looked out at the audience, I saw people wiping tears from their eyes. They weren't crying for Tyler. They were crying for the loss of a family. They were crying because they knew that Mrs. Gable was going home to a house that felt a lot emptier than it did that morning. But she was going home with the truth. And as painful as the truth is, it's the only foundation you can actually build something on. A lie is just sand. It shifts and it swallows you up. I've been doing this a long time. I've seen the worst parts of humanity and I've seen the best. Today, I saw both. I saw the worst in a grandson who saw an elderly woman as a target, and I saw the best in a woman who, despite everything, still had enough grace to ask why instead of how could you. I walked her off the stage myself. I wanted to make sure she felt supported until the very last second. Backstage, she thanked me. She said she felt like she could finally breathe again. That's the goal. That's why I do this. It's not about the ratings or the drama. It's about that one moment where a victim realizes they don't have to be a victim anymore. It's about the moment the power shifts back to the person who actually deserves it. As I walked back to my dressing room, I thought about all the Mrs. Gables out there. I thought about all the seniors sitting in their homes right now, afraid to check their bank accounts because they suspect someone they love is taking from them. If you're watching this or if you're hearing this, let me tell you something. Family doesn't steal from you. Family doesn't lie to you. Family doesn't make you feel like you're losing your mind to cover their own tracks. If someone is doing that to you, they aren't family, they're a parasite, and you have every right to cut them out of your life. You have every right to protect yourself. Don't let guilt keep you in a situation that is destroying you. You owe it to yourself to live your life with dignity and security. The cameras were off, the lights were dimming, and the audience was filing out, but the feeling of that confrontation stayed with me all night. It's a weight I carry, a reminder that the world can be a cold place if we don't look out for one another. I'm not a judge, and I'm not a jury, but I know what's right and I know what's wrong. Stealing from your grandmother is wrong. Betraying the people who love you is wrong. And as long as I'm standing, I'm going to call it out. I'm going to make sure that people like Tyler have nowhere to hide. Because at the end of the day, the truth is the only thing that matters. It's the only thing that lasts. Protect your family, protect your elders, and for God's sake, have the courage to stand up for what's right. If you see something, say something. Don't let the predators win.